This is flowing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as things are winding down at the buffet, please take your time and enjoy. There's Baruch Hashem enough food for everybody. Doubles. I want to take this opportunity, as we're about to begin the formal Farbrengen, to publicly thank and acknowledge our very special sponsors. Chabad Flamingo is an incredible community with many, many amazing individuals, couples, and families. Baruch Hashem. It's not a cliche when I say that our diversity is our strength, and the eclectic mix that comprises our community makes it so dynamic, so welcoming, so elastic, and so enjoyable for everybody to come and experience Yiddishkeit on his or her own level. I think everybody would agree with me when I say that some of the most special people in the entire community are Gary and Linda Benjamin. And we are very grateful to Hashem that they're part of our community. And I want to take this opportunity to thank them for everything they do all year long at the Mitzvah table at No Frills and elsewhere, planting seeds of Yiddishkeit as the Rebbe instructed and inspired us to do in the hearts of thousands, and that's not an exaggeration, literally making waves and ripples across our city and beyond, but especially for making tonight's Farbrengen a reality. Let's just say this whole night is a big deal. And until Mashiach comes, big deals take big funding. It's not easy to put together. So I want to publicly thank Gary and Linda for being so generous and so committed to our community. We're all very, very grateful. Our hope, our prayer, and our blessing is that in Yud Tes Hashem, you should have many, many lange, gesunde, freiliche Jahre together. Amen. I don't want to steal Gary's thunder, but many of you know that Gary was in a life-threatening situation several years ago. And he was, Baruch Hashem, the recipient of incredible miracles, miracles of technology and miracles of the Reifet Obasar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he's with us today. Baruch Hashem, as they say in Quebec, frisch und gesund. He's healthy, and he's wise. And this is an annual Seudas Hadah, in which they publicly express their thanks to Hashem. That's what you're supposed to do when you experience the Almighty's largesse and the Almighty's miracles. You're supposed to gather family and friends, and you're supposed to publicly thank Hashem. And the first Seudas Hadah was Yud Tes Kislev, and Linda and Gary have the privilege of attaching their Seudas Hadah to the Alter Rebbe Seudas Hadah, to the Seudas Hadah of Chassidim and Chassidus. And with no further ado, before we begin the formal part of the Farbrengen, a word from our sponsor.
Thank you, Rabbi. Welcome everybody to our Farbrengen for Yud Tes Kislev. I have a lot to be grateful for. So my main purpose tonight is to thank everyone for their help and good wishes. First, I would like to thank my wife Linda, Rabbi Kaplan, Rabbi Santos, and everyone else in the Flamingo office for arranging today's event. Second, I'd like to thank our guest speaker, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, founder of the Meaningful Life Center and publisher of the Yiddish English Weekly, the Allgemeiner Journal, for educating and entertaining us while we celebrate the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus. And Yeshua Lavner for entertaining us with his music. Third, I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to extend a thank you to all of you who have come to our Sudahu Daf tonight to share Linda's and my heartfelt gratitude to Hashem for the remarkable restoration of my health. I know that for the last couple of years, many of you have said to Tehillim for me, praying for a successful operation in 2017 and then for a successful recovery. I also acknowledge that many shluchim continue to place prayers for my recovery and good health at the Rebbe Zohel in New York, at the Kotel and Rofos Kaver in Israel, and at the graves of several other tzaddikim. I appreciate everyone's prayers and good wishes. Those of you who attended our Sudah in the last couple of years have heard my story, but for those who haven't, here's the condensed version. I was diagnosed with hypersensitivity pneumonitis in 2005. While we do have medications to help slow down its progress, this chronic lung disease has no cure. In a way, I was fortunate, since most people die of this condition within 3 to 5 years after diagnosis, and I survived over 12 years. However, by 2015, my quality of life declined significantly as I required supplementing oxygen, and I slowly lost my ability to participate in any activity more strenuous than sitting down. The only real cure for my condition was a lung transplant, and I was fortunate enough to receive a double lung transplant a little over 2 years ago on October 29, 2017. Just a few weeks after surgery, I started to experience many benefits from my gift of life. I no longer needed supplementary oxygen, which meant that I could leave my home for more than 5 hours at a time, the capacity of my oxygen tanks. I could breathe outside in the cold, a necessity in our climate, and I could walk further than a kilometer and up 4 flights of stairs. Since our last Farbrengen, my health has stabilized. Perhaps the best indication of my recovery is that everyone tells me that I look good. But I think that has more to do with eating Linda's Shabbos meals than with my new lungs. So, enough about me. Following his liberation from prison on Yud Tes Kislev in 1798, Rabbi Zalman redoubled his efforts to disseminate his Hasidic teachings on a far broader scale, and with more detailed and down-to-earth explanations than before. Yud Tes Kislev, therefore, marks the birth of Hasidism, the point at which it was allowed to emerge from the womb of mysticism into the light of day, to grow and develop as an integral part of Torah and Jewish life. Each of the Hasidic rabbis has added to this body of spiritual wisdom, and in 1995, Rabbi Jacobson authored the book Toward a Meaningful Life, The Wisdom of the Rebbe Menachem Mendel Schneerson. The summary on the jacket ends with, at the threshold of a new world where matter and spirit converge, the Rebbe proposes spiritual principles that unite people as opposed to the materialism that divides them. In doing so, he continues to lead us toward personal and universal redemption, toward a meaningful life, and toward God. Rabbi Jacobson's book has 31 chapters covering life's milestones from birth through marriage to death, societal influences like government, technology, and upheaval, and spiritual topics like faith, miracles, good and evil. In particular, there are chapters on health, love, charity, and wealth, which are also the subjects of my message today. My brother, also a survivor of a life-threatening disease, recently sent me an essay titled, The World's 6 Best Doctors. I thought the essay's message to enjoy a healthy life was appropriate for today's celebrations, both because it covers some of the same ground as Rabbi Jacobson's book, and as an inspiration for the 2nd anniversary of my recovery from a potentially fatal disease. Steve Jobs died a billionaire at age 56. Variations of his final essay started to circulate on social media 4 years after his death. Although I later learned that this essay is based on a bunch of adages falsely attributed to Steve Jobs, I don't think that detracts from its inspirational message. With that caveat in mind, this is Steve Jobs' final essay. I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. In some others' eyes, my life is the epitome of success. However, aside from work, I have little joy. In the end, my wealth is only a fact of life that I am accustomed to. At this moment, lying on my hospital bed and recalling my life, I realize that all the recognition and wealth that I took so much pride in have paled and become meaningless in the face of my death. Now I know that when we've accumulated enough wealth to last our lifetime, we should pursue matters unrelated to wealth, matters that are more important. Perhaps relationships, perhaps art, perhaps a dream from younger days. The non-stop pursuit of wealth will only turn a person into a twisted being. God gave us the senses to let us feel the love in everyone's heart, not the illusions brought about by wealth rather. The wealth I have won in my life I cannot bring with me. I can only bring my memories precipitated by love. That's the true riches which will follow you, accompany you, and give you strength to go on. Love can travel 1,000 miles. Life has no limit. Go where you want to go. Reach the height you want to reach. It's all in your heart and in your hands. You can employ someone to drive the car for you or make money for you, but you cannot have someone bear your sickness for you. Material things lost can be found or replaced, but there is one thing that can never be found when it's lost: life. Whichever stage of life you're in right now, with time you will face the day when the curtain comes down. As we grow older and hopefully wiser, we realize that a $300 or a $30 watch both tell the same time, and that true inner happiness does not come from the material things in this world. Therefore, I hope you realize that when you have buddies, old friends, brothers and sisters, who you chat with, laugh with, and sing songs with, that is true happiness. Don't educate your children to be rich. Educate them to be happy. So when they grow up, they will know the value of things and not their price. Treasure love for your family, love for your spouse, and love for your friends. Treat yourself well and cherish others. The 6 best doctors in the world are sunlight, rest, exercise, diet, self-confidence, and friends. Maintain them in all stages and enjoy a healthy life. While I agree with everything in his final essay, I think that the Chassids would add 2 more doctors, namely giving tzedakah and living a life filled with Torah mitzvahs.
Seeing as everybody is seated, Gary has certainly uplifted the entire audience and put everybody into a more spiritual.
No, I suffered. I'm going to listen.
So that we might be able to hear, absorb, and be inspired by Rabbi Jacobson's beautiful words, ideas, and messages. By means of introduction, for a man who really needs no introduction, I want to simply say this. There are many people who are accomplished in an area of life. There are people who are great scholars, who have read many, many volumes and mastered the true essence of the teaching. Oftentimes, those people live in an academic tower, maybe not of indifference, but one that is aloof and removed. There are people who are driven by an activism that goads them and inspires them to engage with people, to inspire people, and in a congenial way to be able to change people's lives. There are people whose gift is in their pen. They're not much of a communicator, but as long as they're safe behind the screen, in the privacy of their own office, they can write blogs and books, and they can engage and inspire through their writings. Rarely do you find a person who brings together a confluence of excellence in so many areas at once. This is a person who has studied an ocean of Hasidic teaching, and I'm not exaggerating. He is, by all accounts, one of today's world experts and masters of Hasidic philosophy and all areas of Torah. This is a person who has written a book, or books I should say, blogs, that have touched the lives of hundreds of thousands and very possibly millions. This is a person who travels regularly and engages with people on the most humane of levels, who inspires them and enables them to become the kind of people they wish to be. This is a person who's also a CEO of a successful organization. I could go on, but by now you know I'm talking about Rabbi Simon Jacobson. It is an honor and a privilege to have him with us for Yud Tes Kislev, Tafshin Pei 5780.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's very beautiful. Rabbi Kaplan is a man of few words, so I never really heard all of this before, but I deeply appreciate it. So firstly, good Yontif everyone, Chag Sameach. This is a holiday, Yud Tes Kislev, 221 years since the founder of Chabad, Hasidism, the Alter Rebbe, as he was known, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, was released from prison.
L'chaim.
So l'chaim to everyone. On this auspicious day, we've been promised that the channels of blessings are open, as Rabbi Kaplan so eloquently described earlier. So our being here is not just a nice get-together, it actually opens up doors of blessings in every area of our lives. So may we merit to receive them well, and the schus of the Alter Rebbe continues to perpetuate till this very day. I would even be bold enough to say that we would not even be here, definitely not this building and this room, were it not for the Alter Rebbe, and of course all those that followed him, till the seventh generation, which is the Rebbe. And I'm sure Rabbi Kaplan will concur that he would be probably somewhere in New York, living at home, or in the area where he grew up. And why would he come here to Toronto? Were it not that his soul was ignited, as thousands of many others, to go out wherever it may be and build oasi, to build communities, to build empires. I walked into the building here and I was taken yet again by literally, I don't know what was here 30 years ago in this particular place, and look what we have here today. So I want to commend Rabbi Kaplan, his dear wife, and all of you for making this happen. And this is the greatest tribute. And this is the greatest tribute to the Rebbe, who inspired Rabbi Kaplan and his wife, inspires all of us. And the Rebbe would say he was inspired by his father-in-law, who was inspired by his father, and all back to the Alter Rebbe, released from prison, opened up a whole new stage in history, which we'll talk about. And that's why we're here to celebrate Jewish continuity. I would say even further than continuity, thriving, growth, and everything we see today in the Jewish world, with all our challenges and everything we've gone through. We cannot ignore and not express our gratitude for the blessings, because all of us are walking miracles. We may take it for granted because we live in better times than ever before with our challenges, but our grandparents and great-grandparents were running for their lives. And here we can sit and celebrate Yud Tes Kislev. I heard from my father and name of his parents and grandparents, when they had to celebrate a Farbrengen like this, Yud Tes Kislev, they had to hide in a basement. And they had to have alternate people who should watch by the window that no spies are watching them to arrest them, which could have led to death immediately. So I think we have to appreciate that as well. So let me share a few words about this special day, which I think the key thing is to always remember the operative word is relevance. The relevance of a special day like this to each of our personal, emotional, and psychological lives. So maybe a good way to begin, it's always good to begin, as the Talmud says, the little humor. Knowing that Rabbi Kaplan is a prolific orator, I'm sure you've heard this joke already, so I'll try to deliver it a bit differently, and you'll forgive me if it's something you've said, because I mean, how am I going to come here and say some new stuff? Is that possible?
I don't even say jokes anymore.
No? Okay, good. I will tell you, I have a brother-in-law, I'm not going to mention who, he's a Chabad Shliach in New York, and I get the best jokes from him. His great jokes, but his delivery is terrible. So I actually was one Shabbos by him, and he asked me to speak, so I told a joke, and the place burst out laughing, and he suddenly got up and he said, I told you this joke last week, and nobody laughed. So I told him, it's the delivery. My brother-in-law has a tendency that before the punchline, he begins to laugh. So they're laughing in the wrong place. So when he finally gets to the punchline, the people are somewhat disoriented. So it's all about delivery. Okay, so here it is. Young little Lucy comes home from school. She's been studying biology, the origin of our species. And she's all confused. Where do we come from? Where do we originate from? So she asks her mother, where do we come from? And her mother says to her, sit down, my dear daughter, and with a beaming smile and a warm disposition, she says to her daughter, we had a grandfather that was born in a small town in Poland, a grandmother in a larger city in Czechoslovakia. And I remember them when I was a young child. They were beautiful. They told us stories from their childhood. Then going back a few generations, we had a great-grandfather who was a major writer. He compiled a very important work on Jewish law. And the further back we go, the yichus, which is the pedigree, gets better and better. All the way back to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, all the way to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It doesn't get better than that, right? It's called yichus. Then her father comes home, Lucy's father, and she asks him the same question. She says, where do we come from, Dad? And in stark contrast to her mother's response, the father sits down and says with a chagrin on his face, and he's all like disturbed, I was always ruining this difficult day, brace yourself. And he begins to tell her, he said, we first originated from apes. Then before that, primates. Then before that, amphibians. And before that, one-celled bacteria. And as far back as science knows today, 16 billion years ago, a ball of gas. So you can imagine this little girl is now really confused. A very different answer that her mother gave her. So she runs back to her mother and says, Mom, tell me. You told me this answer, Dad told me this answer. She elaborates. And her mother very calmly and with a small little smile on her face says to the daughter, we both told you the truth. Your father told you about his side of the family. And I told you about my side of the family. Okay. How was the delivery? Not bad. Okay. No, you don't need to applaud, please. Save the applause till the end. if I deserved. Okay, nice little joke. But here you have actually the reconciliation of this big debate between creationism and evolution. It depends which side of the family. You heard it here first. Why do we have to fight about it? And in truth, this captures, in a simple way, one of the most powerful contributions of Chassidus in general, and specifically the man that we are honoring tonight, the Alter Rebbe, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi. A man far ahead of his times, understood like a true visionary the challenges that were facing the Jewish people at the time, and the challenges we would be facing as the generations would continue, and the challenges I would even say that the human race is facing. And he compiled a work called Tanya. You've all, I'm sure, heard of Tanya. You've gone to classes, online, and so on. We have one right here. Tanya, actually, I hear was just published, right here, released here in Flamingo, Toronto. Is that right? How long ago? Just now? Oh.
Last year.
Oh, last year. Okay. So Tanya. This book of Tanya, a small book, but captures one of the most important messages that this joke reflects, and that is that we actually do have two sides of us, two voices. In the words of the Alter Rebbe, two souls within us. One is an animal soul and one is a divine soul. So it is our choice, because we do have two sides. One voice that is the selfish voice, survival. It's about me, me, me. In the words of Freud, the id, the selfish pleasure principle, what can I get out of it? And then there's another voice. It's called the selfless voice, the divine voice, the transcendent voice. That's not thinking about your own survival and your own needs and about taking. It's the voice of giving, the voice of selflessness, of looking to achieve something more than yourself. And that's called the divine soul. And they are in perpetual battle. Every moment of our lives, 24/7, you're faced with this choice. Is your next move going to be about you, or is it going to be about something greater than you? And this is a battle that was meant to be, so it shouldn't disturb us, and we have the power to choose. So indeed, there are two voices, and there are two yichuses, so to speak, inside of us. One that has animal instincts, that it's again about yourself. We call it the id. And then we have the yid. The yid is a Y before the id that says, yes, that deep in our subconscious, there's a force, but it's a spark. We call the pintele yid, a transcendent power that connects to the divine and seeks to transform the world around us and make it into a home for God. And we have that choice. Are we going to sanctify our lives? Are we going to sanctify our meals, even as we sit right now? Or are we going to just think about ourselves? Now, I know it sounds simplistic, but translate that in your own language. This can be the battles that we have between our ethical choices we have to make at work. Many of us have the conflicts of how we are at home and how we are at work. Some people at home, they're beautiful people. At work, we become sharks and very cutthroat. These are struggles we may have internally about what is the driving force that really defines you. And the list goes on. Our job is to personalize it. But the Alter Rebbe documented this. And though this is a theme of Judaism that goes back from the time of Abraham, but the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, he articulated it and communicated it in a comprehensive blueprint that allows us to deal with this psychological battle and gives us tools and resources how to deal with it. So in a essential way, this is an unbelievable contribution. Now you could ask, well, what happened before the Alter Rebbe? Did they not have this conflict? But the Alter Rebbe, as I mentioned before, like every visionary, sees the big picture. Remember, the Alter Rebbe lived at a time of the birth of assimilation. 500 years ago, 400 years ago, every Jew on earth, whether we're living in the Eastern Europe or Central Europe or in the Sephardic countries, the Arab countries, every Jew was an observant Jew. Not even by choice. You couldn't even join the universities or the trades or the mainstream Protestant or Catholic communities or Muslim communities. The only option was, Rahman al-Islam, there were a few that baptized themselves, which was a minority of a minority. So we lived in insulated communities, discriminated against, overtaxed, hated, and often pillaged and burned at the stake, pogroms, and ultimately the Holocaust. So Jews were very defined by their identity, whether they liked it or not. But then things changed, and they changed approximately the time of the Alter Rebbe, approximately 2 centuries ago, a little more than 2 centuries ago, with what we call the waves of emancipation. That benefited the Jews more than anyone, because suddenly the ones that were most discriminated the discrimination was somewhat loosened. And the Jews were faced with a tremendous challenge. What do we do now with our new freedoms? Long story short, the Jewish people broke into 2 groups. One said, let's have the best of both worlds. There was an expression even, a Jew at home, a goy in the street. A Jew at home, a Gentile in the street. In other words, when we communicate and interact with our neighbors, we behave like they are, whether they're Christian or whoever. When we're at home, we maintain kosher and Shabbat and so on. Obviously, that was a very tenuous solution. It didn't really work. Then there was another group, the ultra-Orthodox, that will put up our own walls, our own ghetto walls, and we will not embrace the new freedoms of the Western world. And interestingly, the Alter Rebbe, in the spirit of his great teacher, the Maggid of Mezrich, and the spirit of his teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, chose a third option. Because, fascinatingly, these two options that I just mentioned, as extreme as they are really suffering from one fundamental problem. You know what that is? That God and this modern world cannot coexist. Well, we say the battle between faith and reason, between science and religion, between belief and modernity, that many believe do not work together, they came to teach absolutely not true. The same world, with all its benefits and blessings that God created, is also the same God that gave us the Torah. So how can we not integrate the two? And they taught, for the first time, documented, something which was always known but not necessarily needed to be articulated, because living in a shtetl, we picked it up in the smell of the chicken soup from our grandmothers. And they articulated the doctrine of called the unity of God everywhere. That you do not find God more in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur in a synagogue than on a regular Tuesday evening out in the street. Because God is indivisible. It's a unity that is intrinsic in all of the universe, and we need to release and free and discover that inner unity in everything. Now, if you think about it, it's a tremendous contribution, not just a contribution. It revolutionizes the way we look at the world. We're not afraid of the world. We're not afraid of the secular world. We are armed and we go on the offense because we see it as an opportunity, in the words of the Kabbalists, to find the divine sparks in everything that we do. Now I'll capture this with a story that happened among many stories that I can share, but this is one, since the book Toward a Meaningful Life was mentioned here. I had the great privilege for many years, and this is probably my claim to fame, was I sat at the feet of the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe, who I mentioned before. Essentially the Alter Rebbe in our generation, 7 generations later. Now, my job was a very unique one. On Shabbos and holidays, there were no notes taken and no tape recording, no recordings made. So when the Rebbe spoke, and the bulk of his talks were delivered on these holidays and Shabbat, could not be recorded. So how do we have them documented? So there were a few of us that had the gift and the privilege and the ability to actually be like walking tape recorders. We had to remember verbatim hours and hours of these talks. And verbatim does not mean just general principles, bullet points. It meant that if the Rebbe spoke for 5 hours, that would yield 100 pages. We know that, because when the recordings, the Rebbe's pace was 20 double-spaced, 8.5 by 11 pages for every hour. So 5 hours is 100 pages. That's how we knew how well we did. So on Shabbat, if we knew we spoke at 5 hours, which would, with breaks and songs and so on, but a total of 5 hours, that had to yield 100 pages and no redundancies. And we were pretty good. I'm not saying to toot my horn or anyone's horn, but we did a good job. We could get 98 out of 100 pages. So of course, you may be wondering, how do you do something like that? As this Farbrengen unfolds, maybe I'll share some trade secrets if you stay around. We're giving them a little enticing. You told me everybody turns into pumpkins what time? Huh?
Keep going.
Okay. So, not only here, everywhere, but that was what I did, and our job was to remember, retain, absorb, and then afterwards recreate it and document it on paper. And today we have these thousands of talks as a result of that. So I worked with a small team. We had the chief, Rabbi Khan of fame, from the beginning when the Rebbe assumed leadership. I worked closely with him. But then after the Rebbe's passing, Gimel Tammuz, actually after the Rebbe had the stroke, so besides the tragedy for all of us, I also had a personal tragedy because I was out of a job. Because my whole life orbited around the Rebbe's talks. So, a long story short, I ended up writing Toward a Meaningful Life because I felt that was what I was trained to do. I sat at the feet of the Rebbe, I had absorbed his teachings. Now the time has come to articulate it in a language that's not prohibitive, that's accessible to people of all backgrounds. And that's what I did. After my book was published by a major publisher in the United States, William Morrow, I was sent by them on a book tour. Now, I had no idea what a book tour was, to be very honest. You know, it was this greenhorn. They told me, a book tour, you travel, they'll treat you like a celebrity, but don't let it get to your head because it's only till midnight when the event is over. And then you turn into a pumpkin, actually. So red carpet, I had people driving me, and I thought it was and you go to bookstores, and in the bookstore you speak, In the morning, you have interviews, media interviews, print, radio, TV. This is back around 1995. Internet had not yet exploded. It was just at its infancy. So I traveled and I had fascinating interactions with people from all walks of life, because here I was speaking not in a synagogue, not in a Chabad house, not in a JCC, but in a bookstore. So in a bookstore you meet people who may not walk into a building like this, for whatever reason. But they may be coming there to get a coffee or to buy an auto repair manual, or whatever it may be. So I met interesting people who I've never met, and this was a real convergence of two worlds, my world and their world. So I have many stories I can regale you with, but I'll share one that captures, you want to know what Chassidus, Yud Tes Kislev, what this is all about? Here's a powerful story that happened in Santa Cruz, California. Anyone has ever been there? Okay, you've heard of it? Santa Cruz, California is a little town around an hour south of San Francisco. It's situated between the Pacific and mountains. It's a very interesting place. Very beautiful climate, very calm, relaxed. I mean, I'm a real New Yorker. It's like antithetical to New York in every possible way, literally. Like there, nobody seems to have a job. People walk around, and there's no rushing, and no one's rude. Everyone's nice. They're too nice, as a matter of fact. You know. And I know you'll say I'm a New Yorker, so I think, but I'm telling you, they were over nice. And I saw a group of young people out in the street, and I asked, what are they doing? I thought they were like waiting to go to a movie or something. No, we're in bliss. That's what they told me. We're in bliss. It's like back to the 60s, like a throwback somewhat. Now, I didn't ask them if it was natural or induced by substances. But regardless, that was the environment. I spoke at a bookstore called Gateways. Not the Jewish one. It's a New Age bookstore on Main Street in Santa Cruz. And it was interesting. I could see there are a lot of Jews there. How could you tell Jews? Tell me. Do you know how? That's the second thing. The first thing I would say, the nose. You can tell by the nose or the nose job. One of the two. Not to be demeaning in any way. You can't tell? Look at my nose. I look Jewish, don't I? What do you think, Rabbi? So the second thing is, yes, not they argue, they do not just sit and listen. They're always reacting. When Jews listen to you speak, they're nodding, they're either shaking their heads or nodding or saying, I heard that one. You know, this is Jews. Maybe later I'll tell you a story about how you're supposed to listen, but that's how Jews. Jews don't listen, they participate. And they let you know very well, I like you, I don't like you. Very quickly you get to find out. Here it happened to be around 250 people in the bookstore. It was a very warm environment, to be very honest. I remember there were carpets and couches, and a lot of people sitting on the floor. It was just this comfortable place. It was coming from a very hard, cutthroat place like New York. This was very easy in a sense because I didn't have to go through a whole preliminary half hour to prove God exists or something to a bunch of skeptics. These were very spiritually oriented people, and they would tell you, some of them told me afterwards, that their spirituality, as you'll share shortly in the story, in the details that I'm going to share, didn't come from Judaism. So here's the story. I gave my talk. At the end of the talk, there were questions and answers. A woman raises her hand in the back, and she says, very beautiful talk, it was very inspiring, very heartwarming. I have a question. I grew up, she said, in Borough Park, Brooklyn. Any of you know Borough Park? Borough Park is a bastion of very, let's call it, religious Jews. I went to Beis Yaakov, a very religious Jewish school, and I had a horrible childhood and a horrible education. It was really horrible. In the sense, I was a child of Holocaust survivors. Both of them were angry. My father was an angry man. My mother was even angrier. Everything was negative. God will punish you, vindictive, punitive, anger, guilt, all types of neurosis, nothing ever, anything positive. Anything I did was, God will get even with you, vengeance, all those negative imagery. I went to school, I would ask questions. I was a very curious girl. I would consider myself a spiritual girl. I was always silenced. Every question I asked, they said, stop asking questions, be a good Yiddish Meidler like your grandmother was, your mother and grandmother and great-grandmother, stop disrupting. At some point she said, life was so unbearable that I finally felt, these were the words she used, I'll never forget the words she said, my soul was asphyxiated. I was suffocating, my soul. So finally, at around age 17, this is all she's speaking in front of the whole crowd there in Santa Cruz. I finally said, enough is enough, I'm out of here. I packed my bags one morning. No one knew what my plans were. I didn't tell anyone. My siblings were far more conformist than I was, and I just picked myself up and I left. I'm sure my parents sat shiva for me. And I went to the West Coast. From the way she described it, it sounded like it was the late 60s. And I went to West Coast, I went to Los Angeles, the scene there, then I ended up in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. And I discovered God, a new God, the not God of Judaism. The God I discovered was the God of Zen Buddhism and the God of LSD, which is not an acronym for Let's Start Davening. Okay? And that's where I found my God. And I moved finally to Santa Cruz, and I found my peace. I don't look back. I have no communication with my family. I don't even want to think about it. It's part of my different world, a different life. And I hear you standing here in front of me, in front of us all, and you're speaking so comfortably about the soul and about God and about the Torah. These are things I learned in yeshiva, and nothing that you're saying I was taught. Where'd you get all this from? Where'd you get this new age stuff? You know, that's personal and psychological and emotional. So I saw the faces of other people in the room, that people had a similar question. She just articulated it. So I said, the short answer, I said, well, we Jews have this thing called a 613-step program. So, you know, some of them laughed. Okay, she smiled, she said, okay, I got it. So I waited afterwards when the crowd dispersed. I sat down with her and a few other people, like 6-7 people remained, and we had this long marathon conversation into the wee hours. The store closed at around 1 o'clock in the morning, then we went outside, it was a beautiful night at the bench, and we spent literally probably till 4:30, 5 a.m. And about everything, you know, life and purpose and meaning and pain and the Holocaust and God, is God good, suffering, you know, all the big questions that most of us probably have never had since we were in college years, you know. But that's what we had there. And I shared with her the following, which just struck me at the moment, and this is what I would say one of the ways you can capture Chassidus and its contribution to all of us, no matter who we are. I shared with her, I don't know where I heard this analogy, but it's a beautiful analogy, I don't know the source. I said to her, look, I'm not here to judge you. I don't know what I would do if my soul was asphyxiated, and I felt no relevance, and I only felt anger, and I felt all the negative reactions, and Judaism was all about pain and guilt and punishment and so on. So I'm not judging you, but I want to tell you that what you rejected was only half of Judaism. They never taught you the other half. And here's the analogy I shared, that when God created the world, He created a bird, and one of the birds was a nightingale. A nightingale has a beautiful voice. It sings. So the nightingale came to God and said, I thank you for giving me such a beautiful voice, but I have a problem. I may be perched on a branch one dusk and serenading into the night, and everybody's loving my melodies and my song, but a predator is looking for a good meal, for dinner. So who will the predator be attracted to? To me, to the piece of meat up on the branch singing away. So please, God, give me something to protect myself from my enemies, from a predator. So God, in this analogy, offers the bird a beak, a sharp beak, that's a razor-sharp beak. It's a form of defense. The bird inspects the merchandise and says, no. For an elegant bird like me, a nose like that, no. Okay. So God says, fine. God offers the bird claws. Claws again, sharp claws, another way of defending yourself and fending off enemies. The bird not becoming such fingernails. Finally, God says to the bird, okay, I'll offer you a set of wings. Wings. The bird never saw wings before. It looks at the wings and says, I don't understand, God. You're the master of the universe. You created it with such grand design. I have enough body weight to carry, to try to escape from my predators, and you're giving me 2 extra pieces of dead weight that'll just weigh me down even more. What's the purpose of that? So God said, no, little bird, of course. These are called wings. When you use them, they teach you, they allow you to fly. And you can soar and escape anyone that's trying to get to you. So I said to the woman and to the few people that were there, a few men and women, I said, look, when you look at Judaism ostensibly, on face value, mitzvahs, many of them seem like a lot of heavy weight. There are mitzvahs that we all can embrace and they make sense, but there's a lot of mitzvahs. And as many as you think you know, there are many more. I don't know if the rabbi told you all of them yet, But mitzvahs, to the point that we have mitzvahs that regulate every aspect of life. How you wake up and how you go to sleep. How you love, sexuality. Oh, come on, the laws of Pesach. That's like the perfect OCD holiday. If you ever saw your grandmother clean. Every crumb, every detail. The laws of Shabbos. The list goes on and on. Here, B'lehem Torah mitzvahs. It's a multitude of mitzvahs, and then in each mitzvah, there are thousands of details and more details. It even tells you what order to cut your nails, and how to put on your shoes, and which shoelace to tie first. Did you know that? Okay, now you know. And there are many more details. So if you look at it, it's a lot of weight. Who needs so much weight? You want to give me certain basics. I shall love another, invite guests, visit the sick. There's a lot of beautiful mitzvahs, this weight. However, there's another side to it. This weight also happen to be wings. And if you learn that they're wings, they can help you fly and soar to places you can never reach without wings. So there's no bird on earth, even a bird that's on a diet. And frankly, birds are never on diets. Only humans are on diets. But even if hypothetically one was on a diet, would never say, don't give me wings because it'll add 10 pounds or 5 pounds or 2 pounds to me. One of the saddest things to see, as I shared with her and with them, one of the saddest things to see is a bird that's grounded and cannot fly. And what's even sadder is a bird that has wings and could fly and doesn't know. So they taught you about the weight of mitzvahs. They never taught you about the wings. They taught you the technicalities, the mechanics, but they didn't teach you the music. Imagine looking at a sheet of musical notes. You don't know how to read them. It's a bunch of gibberish. Who needs to read these squiggles? But then suddenly someone sits down at a piano or a violin or another instrument and they play. They say, magic. Those little notes are magic? Yeah, because that's the body of it, are the notes. The wings, the body of it is a little more weight. But the soul allows you to soar, allows you to fly. And suddenly these notes turn into a force that can transport you to another time and place. Song, the power of melody. What would we be like without it? Let me tell you what happened. The woman began to cry. The others began to cry. And I began to cry. So we had this like sobbing session, like 3 o'clock in the morning, Santa Cruz on a bench. But it was healthy sobbing. It was not coming from pain and from tragedy and trauma, thank God. It was coming from a sense of lost opportunity, a sense of what more can be achieved. And the woman, I remember saying to me, why did they not teach this to me? So I didn't want to tell her, they probably didn't know themselves, But the point is, on that night, as much as I grew up with Chassidus and with the Rebbe and with Chassidim and the whole community and all the beauty of it, I recognized through her hunger, or you could say through the void, the power of the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus in general. It taught us that mitzvahs and Torah are not just mechanics, not just the body of it, the soul. It teaches you how to fly. Now, Jews must have known this before the Alter Rebbe. That's why it wasn't taught then. As I said earlier, we lived in very beautiful environments. A lot of enemies outside of us, but the enemy was not within. And today's the opposite. Today, you can trace the roots of most of Jews' alienation from Judaism is because it's not relevant. Sometimes not relevant because we were never taught it in the first place. Or even when it's taught, it can be very mechanical. It can be very cultural. It can be something that is, we're doing the body of it, but not the soul of it. So if you need language to express what is the contribution of Chassidus, of Yud Tes Kislev, this is just one manifestation of it, one reflection of it, is that it taught us, didn't create it, it taught us the soul and the wings and the music of Judaism. And that, I think, is worth celebrating and honoring, because it carries not just the power how are we going to inspire ourselves and our children and to embrace Judaism and to want to go to synagogue, not just out of rote or responsibility or guilt, but rather because there's a passion involved. But even more than that, it's actually a blueprint for creating transcendence in this highly materialistic world. Because who's not struggling with this challenge of living in a materialistic world that is very successful, communications, technology only growing and speeding everything up, but at the same time, we can lose our soul in the process. I remember sitting in a car, going to a wedding, being driven, a friend of mine that we went to yeshiva years ago together, and we hadn't seen each other. So I thought a great opportunity to catch up. Sitting there in the car, he's busy with his phone, texting all the time, sitting near him, literally next to him. And I'm waiting to find a break. Maybe we can talk a bit. I mean, I wasn't desperate. He didn't want to talk. Fine. I'm not going to fall apart, But finally, I said, you know what, this is like crazy. So you know what I did? I texted him. I literally mean it. I took my phone and I texted him. And I said, hi, how are you doing? A long time we haven't seen each other. How's it going? He looks at his phone and he's following his texts. And he looks at me like he's disoriented, like he's thinking, did I send this like a year ago? Is it now? And he says to me, are you texting me? I said, yeah, I'm sitting right near you. Why are you texting me? He says, because I can't get your damn attention. What do you mean why I'm texting you? So he says, okay, wait online. We never ever ended up having a conversation. So when's the last time you had an eye-to-eye, heart-to-heart conversation with a friend, with your loved one, with children? So it's great. Technology is supposed to emancipate us. It freed us. But it also enslaved us in many ways. So the idea of what Hasidus came to contribute is not just how to be a more passionate Jew. It's actually how to be a more meaningful life. How to live a life of transcendence rather than just being caught up with the latest fashion. A life of meaning and purpose. So this continues. We're going to do like an interlude here, right? Is that how we're working? Or when I finish now, it's over? You're not sure? Huh? Because I have some additional thoughts. But I just wanted to do it more in a paced way, with your permission. What I wanted to do, we'll sing a song, and then I want to continue. I want to capture 5 major contributions that are an outgrowth of the Alter Rebbe's Chassidus, and of course, as articulated and developed by his, his the opposite of predecessors, his Malim Mukemis, his what? The word for successors. Very good. His successors. 7 generations to the Rebbe to capture like 5 principles that we can go away with on this Yud Tes Kislev that I believe are transformative. So l'chaim to you all. May you use the wings that you have to soar to places that are unprecedented heights and realize that Judaism, in all its details, actually offers us to listen to your own song. One of the saddest poems is the Voiceless from Oliver Wendell Holmes, and he says, alas to those who die with their song still inside them. So I don't know if it's a Yud Tes Kislev quote, but I think it captures a point. Yud Tes Kislev Chassidus, Torah teaches us to make sure that your song is sung, because each of us has that unique song. So l'chaim to your song, the song that Chassidus releases allows us to be the best we can possibly be. L'chaim, l'chaim.
I just want to say the buffet is open, but otherwise, please stay seated.
Then they all take the food already. Let's sing a niggin and I'll resume.
We're going to sing a niggin. I can't force you to do anything, but I'm going to strongly advise everybody to stay on and continue to participate in what should and hopefully will be a magical night for all of you.
Magical is a nice word. Huh? Good. That's a beautiful word. So we're going to sing it.
Yeah.
Same buffet or dessert? What is it?
Dessert after, same buffet. This is Jews, okay?
I could have gone on, but I had their attention.
You did.
What?
You did, but it's better to finish with your still.
Yeah, no.
It's a beautiful story. Came home to know. This lady ever came home, so it was good for her.
She's still there. We have a connection, yeah. Very smart, she's learned to this.
Yeah.
But she got her career, she's comfortable there. She's living herself, I told her, you live herself away. She should open up a Chabad house in Bar Park. So I told her. I talked to her openly. She's a very good person. But she's really wounded, hurt. Still thousands of people like thousands. Even more probably. Not all grew up from. But basically, nicht all sind Kabbalah Selniks that just do it for this. You have to have something. And there's a lot of good competition. Buddhism is very attractive, to be honest. Spiritual. Meditators and all that. He says, Lowenthal has a theory that if Chassidus had spread fast enough in Europe, it would have been the thing that would have caught on instead of Zionism and socialism for the masculine. It's interesting because, look, the Alter Rebbe did, there's no question, it engaged people intellectually in ways that Halacha did not.
I actually think it was Chassidim left it out of Rabbi.
Huh?
I think the Rabbi did their part, Chassidim didn't do their part.
Could be also, yeah.
I think this is
And now we're doing our part.
I would say
Chabad has become more of a basic Jewish, a shul like that. Chassidus is not yet the dominant thing. The Ruach, yeah, the Avis Yisrael, the welcoming, the non-judgmental. No, I'm not taking away what's done.
The Rebbe's Chassidim of the previous generations is in Aveda Panimius and Zigishtan Asach. But in carrying forward, carrying the football out.
You don't know, you have to explain. I'm a fan of Chabad.
I gave a sermon 2 years ago about Yitzhak Horowitz. It's in the Zeit of Alter Rebbe, but the Chassid, Azach Chassid, the Kakten Rebbe. So we're going to show you Yitzhak Horowitz had Chassid the Baruch. You know Yitzhak, it's Chassid the Baruch. It's a national inspiration. Yes, technology has something to do with it, but a Yid should have to find a clear for himself. This is the Rebbe's Ufta.
Sure. I don't disagree. No, let's make it clear. I'm not criticizing what is being done. I'm saying that Chassidus should really be at the forefront to rise to its prominence. That's something going on here. Alter Rebbe himself, And then we can't even compare. Today, by me it's not even a shaila that the Rebbe translated the shlichus to go for the Tinnik Shenishba is the Zelbe Chassidus with the Alter Rebbe done, but this is the place to implement it. The Alter Rebbe lived in a time where it wasn't the shluchim the Tinnik. First of all, there weren't Frayim. Secondly, you couldn't send people places. There wasn't that opportunity. It's fascinating to see. I've always been amazed. Because some people say that Rebbe took it to a place where the Alter Rebbe was not necessarily the Alter Rebbe's kavan. It's exclusive. No, meaning the Alter Rebbe was not faced with these challenges. But all the Yesodis of Tanya, the Rebbe translated into the whole Periklam of Tira B'Tachtein. Should we continue? Yeah, I'm going to. So fine,
ladies and gentlemen, I see everybody standing online. This is a good thing. Feeding the body is an exceptionally important part of our existence.
I'm glad you acknowledge that.
A soul without a body, in the vernacular, is called a ghost.
I don't think you have the
Nobody likes ghosts. A body without a soul is a corpse, and that is not a comfortable thing either. And keeping body and soul together is very important. Rabbi, can I get your attention, please? I don't think that anybody questions the relevance or importance of taking care of one's body and feeding oneself. I think that most of you would acknowledge you have to feed your souls too. Perhaps the only area of question is where one ends or where the next begins, or where we place greater importance. It's not every night that a person of the spiritual and scholarly caliber of Rabbi Jacobson is with us. This is a rarity. Chinese food can get here on a regular basis. And if it's not here, it's served elsewhere. After all, in Toronto we do have plenty of Chinese food and lava places. Before I give the microphone back to Rabbi Jacobson, I just want to say two quick things. Number one, there are tanyas. These blue tanyas, they were printed here in our show on Hey Tavis, which is a very important day for us, Chassidim of the Rebbe. And for many reasons, most of which are not important, we didn't get the first large shipment of down tanyas until today, Yud Tes Kislev. So there are more coming. But all of you are welcome to take a Tanya that was printed here, and there's only one single proviso, that you use it. That's the only proviso. For those who wish, there's a share Tanya here every Sunday morning, given by yours truly. And if you can't make it in person, you can watch it live on Facebook or on YouTube afterwards. And the second thing is that Hanukkah is coming. It's not a secret that our world is a little bit darker as of late. And whilst security is an extremely important part of our communal endeavor, sharing light that dispels darkness is even more important. It is possible that you know of a Jew, a child, a major, a man, a woman, it's really not relevant. A member of our Jewish nation, a member of our extended family, who for one reason or another will not have a menorah on Hanukkah, or might not light up. And it's within your purview to take a menorah and simply ask them to use it. Try it, and you will be amazed by the results if each and every one of us here tonight would make the effort to share a menorah and candles with at least 2 Jews. Just 2. Family, friend, business acquaintance. Just 2. Don't stop there, but a minimum of 2. Imagine how much brighter we will have made the world tonight. And imagine how meaningful this enchanted evening will be as it continues to translate into illumination for others. Now that everybody is quiet and respectful, I'm going to return the mic to the master.
You're too kind, you're too kind. L'chaim, l'chaim. As someone involved in communication, which is both in writing and in speaking, I want to share with you an insight or two that I learned from the Rebbe, which is, of course, lies at the heart of the Hasidic approach to things, and really can transform everything we do in life, because communication is so much part of relationships, whether it's you and your spouse, or you and your children, or you and your friends and colleagues and co-workers, community, and in a way, by extension, the entire world. I mean, at the end of the day, all conflicts and battles and discord can spill over on a national level, and then you have war. So communication lies at the heart of how do we find that shalom bayis, so to speak, that harmony, without compromising one or the other, not one person obliterating another. And the Rebbe was a master communicator, as was the Alter Rebbe, as were all the Rebbes. And their form of communication was in speaking and in writing. And there are some interesting counterintuitive insights, which also lies at the heart of what I spoke about before, that I was privileged to be part of the small team that memorized, that was able to remember. So maybe I'll throw in some of those trade secrets as well here, with your permission, okay? So the first thing about communication is it's not about how brilliant and how smart and how good of an orator and a wordsmith you are. That definitely helps. But the key to communication is the exact opposite. It's how well you understand and you're sensitive to and appreciate the one that's listening to you. There's an expression, again, I don't know who coined it, but it goes like this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Someone gets up and speaks, and they can be brilliant, genius, great ideas, revolutionary ideas, but they don't care. You sense arrogance, you sense they have no empathy for you and the audience. So you're not going to give them all your attention. But if you hear someone speak to you that cares about you, and you feel dripping from their words and from their expressions and from their body language, care, concern, you'll give them the benefit of the doubt. In Hasidic thought, there's a concept. It's called that the root of the containers is greater than the root of the energies, which means to contain and receive is more powerful than to give and to bestow. The Rebbe epitomized that. As brilliant as a scholar, and literally brilliant in every possible way, what was more brilliant was his sensitivity and his empathy and care about the individuals. And that was sensed in every word that he uttered. So yes, people were blown away by his mind and by his ideas and his analysis and probing and examining an idea of so many different angles. And of course, his social revolution that he created and so many other great innovations. But that type of sensitivity is something you can't fake. It comes from a deep sense of humility, because you don't even take your own brilliance that seriously. I saw this so many times. I remember, it was, the year was 1989. It was Sukkot in Crown Heights. You were around in 89? You were there? And Sukkot, the Rebbe had a custom that after the evening service, he would speak from his platform, half hour, 45 minutes, every night of Sukkot. And you can imagine Sukkot in Crown Heights was packed. Those 7 Sundays was packed, wall to wall. Guests from all over the world, probably 5,000 guests at least that would come. Not sure the exact numbers, but it was packed. The Rebbe comes to his podium, which was moved to the center of the synagogue after the prayer. I was standing right under the Rebbe to listen, because this was all, again, Yom Tov. There were no recordings we had to remember. And the Rebbe, uncharacteristically, doesn't begin to speak. He's looking around. I never saw that before. Looking around, looking here, there. And finally, he says to the secretary, he says, "Where are the Sharf boys? Where are the Sharf children?" Sharf was their family name. I heard the Rebbe say, the Sharf Kinder. Sharf was a young man in his 30s who had just passed away a few weeks earlier, leaving a widow and little children. 3 little boys, yeah. Yeah, 3 little boys and 3 little sons and a daughter. And what I heard, I'm not sure about this part, but I heard that he had written to the Rebbe, knowing that his life was coming to an end, "Please take care of my children." And the Rebbe is asking here, there are thousands of people waiting, Where are the sharp children? Now go find little children. It's like a needle in a haystack. Where are you going to find them? So everyone began looking. Suddenly, miraculously, they were found. And how do they get over to the Rebbe? They're being passed by people, like over, there's no path, nowhere to walk. So little children, and they end up standing right near the Rebbe. And as soon as they settled in, the Rebbe began to speak. Okay, you can say, but this is not over. After that, every Farbrengen, every Saturday there was a Farbrengen, 1:30 in the afternoon after the prayers. The Rebbe would Farbrengen. These 3 little boys stood to the Rebbe's right. Little kids, innocent little orphans. And the Rebbe would make Kiddush, take a piece of cake, a few pieces of cake, and like almost nonchalantly, without any drama, no airs about it, would just pass it on to the kids. And they enjoyed the little cake. And I would watch this every week. My job was to listen, like all of us were there to listen. To me, it was, I can't tell you, it was more touching than almost anything. Because here the Rebbe is about to deliver an important talk about vital matters, about life, about Judaism, about direction, what he wants of us. And thousands of people are waiting and anticipating what he's going to say. And the complete presence, completely just focusing on these children, that act of little compassion, just stretching out his hand, to me that's the greatness. The greatness of Abraham and the greatness of all our greats. They never took their brilliance that seriously in a certain way. They transcended their own brilliance, maybe is a better way to put it. Communication. So here's what I learned from that. When I began giving classes many, many moons ago, who's counting, but it was back in 1981, before the war, before many wars, as they put it. It was a time there was no email, there was no internet, there were typewriters. Anybody knows what a typewriter is? You all look so young. Oh, one person. It was a time when mail was delivered with camels and donkeys and, like that. Snail mail. So I remember when I began, so I was giving a class every Thursday night, then later it turned Wednesday night. I still do it till this day. And the people coming to the class were people from the arts and entertainment industry. They were mostly Jewish, very spiritual, but not from the Jewish sources. A lot of skepticism, and a lot, like I described before, the woman. They all talked about Far Eastern disciplines and psychedelic experiences. This was what many Jews were caught up with. One of them was a close friend with Ram Dass, who is a Jewish man called Steve Alpert, and with other Jews. 60% of Buddhists in North America are Jews. Because Jews are seekers. They don't find it in their own backyard. And some of them were sitting at my table. So I realized I was at a disadvantage even before I began to speak. Why? Because here I am, sitting with a yarmulke and a beard. It was a little blacker, and but it was clearly Jewish. I was not projecting a neutral image. And who knows what they're stereotyping me as. Maybe I remind one person of an angry grandfather that schlepped him to shul on synagogue Yom Kippur against his will. Or, is that what your grandfather did? Yeah. Or irrelevant Hebrew school teacher teaching hallow, bat mitzvah lessons. Or maybe even positive memories, but it was definitely not neutral. And I thought to myself, I want to really reach, I want to communicate, I want to create a common ground between us. We're so apart. I come from one world, they come from another. So I tried an experiment. And this came straight from the book that I learned of how sensitivity and communication is not about you, but it's about the listener. Not compromising the integrity of the original, but knowing who you're speaking to. And I tried an experiment. The experiment was, I created like a whole new language. I didn't use any words that were associated with Jews, or with Torah, or with religion. I didn't use God, not Torah, not mitzvahs, not Mashiach. I didn't use any of this language. Because I knew the stereotype. And I knew that Woody Allen stereotype that so many people have. Just to show you an example or two of them, if I may. These are the anti-rabbi jokes that I use all the time. So please, I apologize. Since some of my best friends are rabbis, I'm not anti-Semitic. Okay, just for the record. So these two guys get lost in a hot air balloon, right? And they're looking around, trying to find their way. They finally see someone down below and they yell out, "Where are we?" And he yells back at them, "You're in a hot air balloon." Okay. A gust of wind comes and whisks them away. They're back to square one. They don't know where they are. So one guy looks at the other and says, "What was that?" He says, "That was definitely a rabbi." He says, "How do you know that?" He says, "Because what he said was true but irrelevant." You know? Now, this is Canada here. In the United States, I get an outburst of laughter because people say, yeah, that's how they look at rabbis. So this stereotype about the rabbi, irrelevant. Maybe he's a nice guy, but he's out of touch, you know? And then there's worse stereotypes, obviously. Condescension, judgmentalism, hypocrisy. I'm not going to go down to the nightmare level. But stereotypes are very profound. As a communicator, I can tell you 90% of the work is dealing with a stereotype. Because you can say all the right things, but if the person has an image of you or your message or the ideas you want to share that's preconceived, how do you know that? It's invisible. So you have to be aware of it. And I'm always aware of it because I train myself to always be sensitive. So here I was with a group like that, who were very sharp and cynical and skeptical. They came because they liked me and we had a conversation. So I decided I'm going to speak a language, no Jewish references. And I wanted to see how this works. So instead of God, I used words like higher reality, the essence of it all. And if it was a particularly New Age group, I would use like undefined layers of subconscious energy or something like that, you know. Sounds great, you know. Undefined layers, that's the key, undefined. Indeterministic. And instead of Torah, I use the word blueprint. Instead of mitzvahs, I use the word connections. And instead of Mashiach, Geula, I use the word destination. Yeah? And here I was, waxing eloquent and pontificating, and how you connect to the essence of all reality, to that non-existential energy state, through following a blueprint, making these connections, to the point that you get to the destination of total fusion, of seamlessness between matter and energy, between form and function, between the inner and the outer, body and soul, indeterminism and determinism, total fusion. And here they were, I tell you, they were like mesmerized, I have to tell you. They loved it, it was gewaldig. I was going on, talking about this, and I went through everything that it says in Torah, Chassidus about these matters. I just didn't use that language. You know, I talked about energies and containers, and how undefined becomes defined, and how we take the defined and turn it into undefined, and how do we deal with the different difficulties. We talked about dissonance, and trauma, and dysfunctionality. You know, I didn't use the word shattering of containers, but I used a dysfunctional imbalance, lack of harmony in life, and everything. I went through it all. After a few weeks, I remember this vividly, a fellow comes over to me. He was actually in the band called Jay and the Americans. Any of you remember in the 60s? Jay and the Americans. Kenny Vance was his name.
I remember the 60s.
Okay, good. That's good. Your memory is a good memory. May you always remember things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember the 70s.
What about the 50s?
I was born in 58.
Okay.
Late 50s.
Okay. I knew that somewhere we're going to get you. So the guy comes over to me before one of the classes, and he says, "You know, these have been great classes, and people love it. But I have to ask you something. Are you talking about God?" So he asked me. So I said, "Yes, but shh, don't spoil it for the others." You know. So it worked. The experiment worked beyond my expectation. And I can tell you, I did not change any iota of the message. I didn't mince words. I spoke about a blueprint and so on. I saw vividly with my own eyes how communication is all about how you say it, not what you say. You could say the same thing, and you can drive somebody, you can go ballistic, and you can say the same thing in different words, and they'll say, "That's beautiful." I know it may sound somewhat like almost dismissive. No, it's not. Because words are loaded. Words are loaded, ideas are loaded. we have much more stereotypes in our minds than we think we do. And a stereotype doesn't always mean dangerous. Not always stereotype is racism or discrimination or anti-Semitism. Stereotype means you think you have it figured out. You think you know what it's like, so therefore when someone says that word, oh, I know that. Let's move on. We all have certain elements of that. There's the story with the farmer of Chelm. You've heard of this town called Chelm? Every city has its Chelm, right? Every community. Chelm was this town in Poland they say it was very intelligent people, but their neighbors were resentful, so they created this whole myth of the fools of Chelm. And there's tremendous stories and lessons. They're great lessons that you learn from Chelm. One of them, here's one of them. There's a farmer on Chelm. He was the farmer, he had a little farm. Chelm was a small town, so you can imagine the farm was not very large. A little like a garden. But it was his garden, it was his farm. He had inherited from his parents, grandparents, he knew every grain of soil. One day, he gets a visit from a distant cousin who lives in, where are the biggest farms in the world? Let's say Kansas, Texas, I don't know. Saskatchewan. Okay, Saskatchewan. Large farms? Okay, there we go. Like hundreds of acres? Okay, Saskatchewan. Never heard that one. Okay.
There's more polar bears than people in this country.
Yeah. And what's your opinion of Donald Trump? I'm not going to go there. Okay, no. I'm just
You really want to know?
Okay.
I'm not afraid to speak about it.
So, bottom line is, the cousin comes and he gives him a royal tour of the Chelm farm on Chelm. And they sit down to dinner and he says, cousin, what do you think about my farm here in Chelm? So the cousin says, it's very nice and cute, but it's tiny. The Chelm farmer's taken aback. He's like, insulted, tiny? How big is your farm in Saskatchewan?
Saskatchewan.
And that was intentional. I wanted to just show Americans don't know how to pronounce these Indian names. Do you know how to pronounce New York? Saskatchewan. He says, how big is your farm? So how's this big city farmer going to explain to him? Point of reference, he says, well, let me put it this way. It takes all day for me to travel with my tractor from one end of the farm to the other. Suddenly the Chelm farmer gets aroused and stimulated his compassion, empathy for his cousin. He says, cousin, don't feel so bad. I once had a tractor exactly like that. You know? I once had a tractor exactly like that. Why? He couldn't fathom that there's such a large farm. So if he's saying it takes all day to travel, he was convinced it's the vehicle. That he once had an old shmata jalopy that took all day to crank up, to move from here to here. Now, was the Chelm farmer malicious? Was he? No. Was he objective or subjective? If I handed out a card to everyone here, and the question is, are you objective? Check which box. Objective, subjective, narrow-minded. How many people are going to mark narrow-minded and subjective? Because part of subjectivity makes you think that you're objective. But the true answer is, we're only objective as our perspectives allow us, based on our experiences. If you cannot fathom a farm that large, you're never going to think it could be that. You'll always say it must be something else. What's the point? The point is that one of the fundamental principles in Hasidic thought, introduced by the Alter Rebbe, is a word which I'm sure you've heard in classes, Rabbi Kaplan and other classes. The word is bittul. It's spelled in English B-I-T-T-U-L. It's very hard to translate it into English, maybe because the English language doesn't tolerate the concept. Bittul is a combination of modesty, humility, but I like to use suspension of self, meaning suspending yourself in the presence of something greater than yourself. It's not annihilation. It's not annihilation or obliteration. It's recognizing, like when you stand in awe of something greater than yourself. That's a bittul to something beyond you.
Self-abnegation.
Self-abnegation. Abnegation sometimes can be negative, but the point is, it's about being open to a bit larger perspective. The Chelm farmer was not aware that something that large. We all have our farms, every one of us. And your farms are your stereotypes. These are the way you see things. One of the most important things for any intelligent person, and especially what Hasidic thought teaches us, is to expand our horizons, to look at the bigger picture. So if someone asks you, what does the horizon look like? The answer is, it depends where you're standing. If you're standing on the ground, you'll give one description. You go up 30 feet on a mountain, another description. You go up to the peak of the mountain, it's a whole different answer. They're all true. It all comes down to what's your vantage point, your perspective. So communication lies at the heart of exactly this, of appreciating that there are things sometimes beyond that you have not yet understood. And when you have to put yourself in the shoes of your listener, it forces you to transcend yourself. I grew up steeped in Torah language, Hebrew, Yiddish, words. Very easy for me to speak that language. But then I'm speaking only to myself or to people around me, and maybe you don't even really understand. You know when you really know you understand something? If you can translate it into a language that's not your comfortable language, in a language of a recipient that does not know your native tongue. Because then you're forced to explain what it means. What does God mean? Tell me exactly. The word God. So when you think about terms like, Chassidus uses for God, Atzmus Umuhus, you know what that means? The essence of essences. The essence, exactly the word I used. I didn't make up my own word. I just didn't use the word God. Because the word God can be a meaningless word. One of my favorite quotes, I use it in Torah Meaning for Life, is when Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, who was a colleague of the Alter Rebbe, and also a mechutin, their children married each other. So he once said to a self-professed atheist, he said to him, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Now think about that. The God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Which means before we debate, God exists, God doesn't exist, first let's define what God means. If God is some guy sitting on a throne with a long white beard, waiting to strike us with lightning when we misbehave, you told me that's God, I would say I'm an atheist if that's God. If God is defined very differently, that's a whole other story. There was this Hebrew school teacher teaching students who were going to public school, but every Sunday they would study for an hour some Jewish studies, Torah studies. Now, some of these children grew up in very assimilated homes, so the teacher tried to engage them and said, tell me something, a symbol in your home of Judaism, of God. So one child said a Hanukkah menorah, this one said a talit, one said a mezuzah, one said a Shabbos candle. There was one child, no matter how much the teacher nudged, the child had nothing to say. Anything, nothing in your home reminds you of God, nothing at all. So finally this little girl says, now that you mention it, the only time I hear the word God is when my mother gets on the bathroom scale and she says, oh my God. So that's her God. Now you may think it's an innocuous, innocent story, but that's her God. And she'll grow up thinking that's what God's about. The thing you say when you feel you're overweight, even if you are or you aren't. And I say it because this is really the study of language and the study of communication. You'd be shocked if you really dissected words that you are so comfortable with, and other people are very not comfortable with it. That's why it was one of the greatest tragedies, is when God confused the languages, where the nations in Parsha Noach, in the 2nd chapter in Genesis, all the nations spoke one language, and what did God do? He saw they were unified. He confused their languages. That's where the word Babylon comes from. Babel, to Babylon. We babble and babble. Bavel, it means confusion. Confusion of languages. If I can't speak with your that language, not just two different foreign languages. We could both speak English, but we're speaking a different language. We will never have a common denominator. And this is very true when it comes to relationships. So here we can go into a whole relationship stand-up comedy. You all know what relationships are. Good. So relationships. So here I'll share with you, we'll talk a little about Chazara. Chazara was the expression used by Chassidim back to the Alter Rebbe's times as well as now. Those that remembered what the Rebbe said on a Shabbos and a Yom Tov when there were no notes and no tape recordings. So, what's the secret of that? And here is a guarantee, money-back guarantee. That a few tips and you can improve your memories by 20%. What do you think? I didn't even tell you that I'm going to do that, right? It's a promise. 20%. Guaranteed.
Down to a science?
Yeah. And it's been tested. So there are many tricks to the trade. I don't want to say tricks is really not the right word. You definitely need a gift. But there are actually things you can do to improve memory. And which is really, to make it very clear, memory, the secret of memory is the secret of listening. And the secret of listening is the secret of absorbing. So think of it this way. Who in society remembers things best as a group? Children. The things that happened to you in your childhood, whether important, significant, insignificant, nonsense, it remains with you, remains etched in your memories. Sometimes to our detriment, but sometimes beautiful. As adults, we're always looking tricks of how to figure out to remember, how do we retain, take notes, not take notes. Everyone has their little tricks. Now, why do children remember so well? For example, try to teach a language to an adult, ABC to a 20-year-old. Never. Who's going to have the patience to sit and write A, B, 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 B for 50,000 times? You'd say, I don't have patience for this. I got to go make money or something, Children, you can have them sit there and they do this exercises again and again, completely irrational, but they do it. You know why children remember better? Because memory is not a factor of the intellect. Because intellect, children clearly have a less developed mind than adults do. Memory is a faculty not of intellect, but of absorbing. It's actually, as you'll see in a moment, counterintuitively non-intellectual. It may be hard to get a child's attention, but when you do, a child retains. So a very simple example, a dry sponge. A dry sponge absorbs all the liquid. What about a saturated sponge? Doesn't absorb well. Developed minds, mature minds are saturated. We have ideas, we have perspectives, we have opinions. We may even have mastered things. So the more you've mastered, the more your sponge is saturated, and the less you can really absorb something new. That's why you can put it this way, that every human being, every mind has like two wheels. I don't mean physically, but think of the absorber and the processor. Adults process, and they don't absorb very well. Children absorb and don't know how to process yet. That's why they remember so well. So just to use two simple examples, if you're in front of a court, in front of a judge and a jury, you don't want a persuasive witness or a persuasive piece of evidence to sway the judge and the jury before they hear all the evidence. I mean, I guess on which side you are, but if you're an objective person, you want them to hear it all. If you suddenly hear that there's great witness or there's great evidence, and they already come to a conclusion, you want them to keep an open mind. Listen to the evidence, don't process, absorb, listen, then process it all and see what conclusion you come to. We all do research. Anyone that does good research is not going to come to a conclusion until you finish gathering all your data. Because that last piece of data can change the picture. If you start processing while you should be absorbing, you're going to usually make mistakes. There's an expression for it in the Talmud. It says, "I did the Torah lemivla lepolit." It's Aramaic. Anybody knows Aramaic? Did you teach them Aramaic yet? No classes in Aramaic. Gemara. It means while you're busy absorbing, you can be busy exuding. In simple terms, when you're busy listening, you can't be speaking. When you're speaking, you can't be listening. You just can't do both, as smart as you may be. So the true art of remembering is to shut off the processor, which is extremely difficult for an adult mind, especially for a smart mind. So when the Rebbe spoke, we had to do? We had to go back to our childlike innocence, as odd as it may sound to you, and be absorbers. We're only listening to absorb. A little, obviously, to understand just enough that you're listening. But I can tell you, this may sound weird, but the things that the Rebbe spoke about, that I already had information about beforehand, either because I'd studied it or because I knew it or whatever it may be, I never remembered as well as new ideas that I never heard before. Because new ideas, I never heard of before, so the only thing I have is what I'm absorbing. Once you already have ideas in your mind, and then you hear a speaker speak, you right away say, okay, that fits into my framework, it answers the question, I connect it. You're processing. As you're processing, you're no longer purely listening. It's how you're listening through your lens, not through the lens of the speaker. And I remember this vividly. When the Rebbe would speak, I always stopped that temptation to right away say, wow, that's brilliant. That answers this, and that explains that, and so on. It was really absorbing, and it's very difficult to do, I can tell you that, but it's the key. So here's the exercise, and this I've tried with around 1,200 people to date, not in one group, small groups of 20, 30. This is where the 20% comes in. So here's the exercise number one. Take a book, you can do this in the privacy of your homes. Take any book you like, any sefer or book. Open up to a page, 2 pages, and the goal is to read it as many times as you wish. There's no time limit. Then you have to close the book and then take a blank piece of paper and write down what you just read. It doesn't have to be verbatim, not word for word. The ideas, the flow of the ideas that are coherent. What did you read? And put it down on paper. What did you read? Sounds simple, right? So here's what happens. I've tested this, I said, in at least 50, 60 groups. And before we begin, I always ask the group and say, okay, before we start, let's estimate. What do you think you're going to be able to retain? How much will you be able to recreate? 10%, 100%? Most people say between 70 and 80%. 100% most people are not going to say, even if they feel they can. And zero not, but 70, 80. And we begin. And I see they read the book, and I could right away tell who thinks they're the smartest people because they do it very quickly. And then they sit down and they finish and they wait for everybody like this. They're done. They're waiting. And they're so proud. Okay, after 15 minutes approximately, everybody finishes. I ask each person to give the book and what you wrote to your neighbor. Let them mark it. And I can tell you, nobody reaches 70% the first time around. 60%, 65, rarely 70. The smartest ones, the ones that did it quicker, the percent goes right down with their quickness. To the point, listen to this, that people wrote things, the ones that were the fastest ones, wrote things that contradicted what it said in the book. I mean, it contradicted. So I asked them, how could it contradict? The person says it's contradicts. They said, because I didn't agree with what it says in the book. They didn't even hear my instructions. I said, but that was not the exercise, whether you agree or disagree. That's a different exercise. The exercise is to write what it says there, even if you disagree. Second time around, we do it a second time, and this time everybody's been humbled. Everybody thinks they're smarter and they remember more than they do. And I tell you, everybody goes up around 20%. So try it out, you'll see. Do it once, you'll probably get lower. Do it the second time, once you've seen how not well you did it, and then you do it differently. The second time around, people read, and they read it again, and then they close their eyes and try to reconstruct it, and then they close it, and then they write it. So what do you see here? It's not about brain power. It's not about firepower. It's about humility. It's about being able to shut down, not be aggressive. So when adults hear you speak, I mentioned it before, they right away think, every one of us, when you hear someone speak, I like the speaker, I don't like the speaker, I can make money with this, I can't make money with this, it's relevant to me, not relevant, We're processing. Now, there's nothing wrong with processing. The only problem is that processing has to come after absorbing, if you really want to study. Now, obviously, there's another factor here that the Rebbe commanded that respect. I wanted to hear what he had to say. To us it was like Moses coming down from Mount Sinai and sharing information that can change your life, and you can't take notes. You're going to listen closely. If someone said to you in an hour from now, a talk will be delivered that can change your life, and you can't take notes, and you can't record it, I guarantee you your adrenaline will go up and you're going to listen a lot better. So these days I meet sometimes people and they say something to me, and for whatever reason I'm daydreaming or I'm distracted, and they say, so did you hear what I said? So, the cute response, and this is not meant to be used. I feel actually embarrassed to say this, but sometimes you say, can you rephrase what you said? I actually didn't hear a word they said. You just say rephrase, so it sounds like you heard it, but you didn't appreciate the depth. I don't do that anymore. I used to do that. I found it to be a little not respectful, whether they knew it or not. So I say, no, I didn't really hear. Can you say it again? They say, you're able to remember 5 hours of the Rebbe's talks, you can't remember 3 minutes of mine. So I don't want to be the one that breaks it on them, that I don't hear history unfolding and what you have to say exactly, So obviously I don't apply my engines to absorb. I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm just saying, so there's definitely that factor. So this is a tremendous lesson, first of all, in bittul. I'll give you just one more exercise, and that is with spouses. You ever have a disagreement with your spouse? Let's talk about a long-standing one. That's unresolvable, so to speak. We agree to disagree. I see a lot of people are commenting on that. That means, what's going on? Okay, so try this out. Try this out. You have a disagreement, and you don't even want to even address it anymore because you never resolve it. So you just choose to push it under the carpet. But here's the thought. Go to your wife And I say this because men have more problem with this than women usually do. And say to your spouse, listen, I know we disagree about this point, and I know we don't like to bring it up, but I want you just to share with me your perspective once more. And I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to disagree with you. I want to just hear it completely, and I'm going to repeat to you your perspective. Even though I may disagree, but I want to make sure I'm hearing what you're saying, your way of looking at it. Now, of course, this is a little somewhat of a trick to exercise. Because if you can repeat to somebody what you disagree with, and they hear you, that you're already resolving half of it, because that means at least you're sensitive enough. Most of us cannot repeat something we disagree with. Or if we repeat it, we usually add some caveats into it to make sure to undermine its argument. So this is an exercise in really reaching to someone you care about and saying, let me hear it from your perspective. And I'm going to repeat it as best as I can convey it. You probably won't be able to do that. And your spouse will probably tell you, no, you didn't communicate it right, you weakened it, etc., etc. But it's just, my point here is just to show you how this is far-reaching in the ability. And this is a concept straight from Hasidic thought, straight from the Alter Rebbe, developed by the other Rebbeim, concept of bittul. Going beyond yourself, going outside of yourself, being able to absorb something that's greater than you are. And I can tell you without hesitation, I would not be the person I am today had I not spent those years absorbing as best as possible. Now, none of us are perfect. Absorbing the Rebbe's ideas. It was beyond words. As much as I could have conceived of my own, being able to absorb, besides the fact a holy man, a godly man, but a brilliant man and a brilliant man, the ability to go out of your own way of looking at it and absorbing another changes who you are. Because it means you can get your ego out of the way and you can be more trustworthy. Because you can trust yourself. I remember once writing a Farbrengen. It was Sunday, Monday, the days after the Farbrengen. And I wrote up 20, 30 pages of the Rebbe's talk. I showed it to my senior Rabbi, our senior veteran who did the work from the early years, 1950 and on. And he disagreed. He disagreed with the premise, the way I remembered it. And we argued back and forth. He gave me his thing, I gave him his. We argued back and forth. And he said to me, look, I can't tell you 100% I'm right, he said. I think that's the way the Rebbe meant it. But it's up to you, because I was the final writer, so he deferred. He said, if you think it's the other way, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I don't think it's the right. Now, I could have easily, I spent hours. I spent maybe 40 hours writing it. So I was invested in my perspective, obviously. But I remember saying to myself, you know what, this is not about me. This is going to be published for posterity. In 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, someone's going to read this. And if he's right and I'm wrong, so maybe I got my idea on paper, but it may not be what's reflecting what the Rebbe wanted to say. And I didn't have to be accountable to anyone, except I wanted my own integrity. So I decided, you know what, I'll sleep on it. I wake up in the morning, I go back to Rabbi Yoel, I go back to speak with him, and I said, tell me again why you think. So he told me how he understood it. I went back to my notes that I had written right after Shabbos, when it was just fresh and wasn't yet fleshed out. And I said, and I wrote down his way of looking, I wrote down my way in short, and I then compared it to my original notes, and I said, what does it lean toward? And it actually leaned more toward his approach. You know what I did? I tore up 30 pages. And it was not easy to do. If you've written, you know that's not an easy thing to do. And it was an internal thing. But you know what? It changed me. Because I said to myself, that was exactly my objective. My objective was not to be right. My objective was to get on paper as close as possible that which needs to be said. It's in a way, I don't want to say the word cleanses you, but in some way it refines you, because it causes you to go out of your own way of thinking and really looking to understand it from another perspective. It affects me till this day. I speak to people, I'm able to listen differently. I can hear things that I may not have been able to hear. Again, nothing is perfection. We're all human beings. We make our mistakes. God knows I share my mistakes. But at least I try to ask myself, get another opinion. And these things may sound subtle and mean and like almost insignificant, but they can change dramatically things, especially in areas of relationships. Can you listen to your children? Sometimes we hear our children what we want them to be. And you know what? Your child may not be exactly as you want them to be, because maybe they have a different personality. Can you hear someone that has a different perspective? Now, this doesn't mean that we're pushovers and we ignore that which we've developed. You come with that, but there's nothing wrong with being open. Now, these are, what I'm speaking now, really Hasidic principles that may sound not as esoteric and profound as you may see them in a Hasidic discourse, but the end conclusion of all discourses comes down to this. Are you ready to become greater than you are on your own? Are you ready to reach to something greater? And if God is to mean anything in our lives, it means it's opening up to us to higher and greater horizons. So I want to say a l'chaim to the Rebbe, a l'chaim to the Alter Rebbe, a l'chaim to all the Rebbes. They gave us a great gift, a blueprint, and a approach, not just a philosophy, a way of life that can help us become much greater than we ever could imagine and reach unprecedented heights and really fulfill the calling and mission, that indispensable mission that each one of us has in this world. And finally, that each of us fulfill that mission together. Shliach, the Rebbe says, an ambassador, a messenger, together with the 10 faculties, adds up to what? To the destination that I spoke about, the fusion of spirit and matter, otherwise known as Mashiach and Geula. L'chaim, l'chaim. Video to play?
That was
Sure.
Tes Kislev.
Great. Where are we time-wise? How's it going?
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a brief video interlude, little something, station identification about Yud Tes Kislev. The night is not over yet. Please stay on. After the video, a little music, and Rabbi Jacobson will continue to inspire us.
Take as many pictures as you want.
Do you happen to have a pen?
A pen?
Yeah.
You want a pen?
Autograph.
I think you were autograph the Tanya.
Yud Tes Kislev, the 1930
Tag me. Tag me on Facebook.
How did they train you to know how to approach memorizing something?
I trained myself. Nobody trained me.
I don't have a pen.
When did you come out with the theory that was processing?
I don't have a pen either. I'm sorry? I'm sorry? What would you ask?
citizen, was the Alter Rebbe, was released from imprisonment in Tsarist Russia in the year 1798.
What is your name? Huh? What's your name?
Martin.
Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N?
Usually lasting 5 or 6 hours into the early morning. In fact, the Rebbe is a descendant of Rabbi Schneer's Zalman and gets his name Schneerson from Schneer. Schneer means two lights. His parents by divine inspiration, mainly for the 3 parts of the Torah that he illuminate, by updating the code of Jewish law and introducing Chabad philosophy in his classical work, The Talmud. In the early days of Hasidism, the scholarly elite of Lithuania and Belarus saw the movement and the Alter Rebbe as fomenting revolution within Jewish society by empowering the lower uneducated classes to view themselves as
Did you
having
get
equal
the
access to
theory about
God.
processing, absorbing?
They presented the menace of Rabbi Schneer's
what?
When did you figure out
by
that
thinking
it was
it
about
as a
processing
political
and
revolutionary.
Sorry?
When did you figure out that it was about processing?
When I was working on it, as I was working on it, I saw what's necessary to do.
Against the Alter
Do you have
Rebbe.
any resources I could?
One of the 22 charges the government
I've spoken and taught it many times. If you go online, meaningfullife.com, you'll find a lot of material on this.
Years earlier, the Alter Rebbe had founded Chabad in Israel, and it became the obligation of every Chassid to support the Jews of the Holy Land, which was not a Jewish movement at that time. The Rebbe was arrested and taken to the Peter Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg.
Thanks for coming.
When he was
Maybe
there,
afterwards when
he
we
was
finish
visited
there,
by his Rebbe, the Magen Mesrich,
Thank you.
and by Rabbi Israel Hashem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, both of whom had long since passed away. The Alter Rebbe asked, "Why have I been in prison?" His Rebbe's answer,
I'm here.
"There was a witness against you on high, for you obtained the greatest secrets of the Torah and scattered them across the lonely earth." When I am released, should I refrain from teaching Hasidus? The Rebbe asked. They replied, "On the contrary, Now that you have finally broken the barrier, you must increase your efforts.
It's getting around.
With Rabbi
That's what I'm saying. I
Shneer's
said it to some people, so they say, great. Was nicht? Was nicht, sicher.
I'm a big fan of this.
Huh?
What do they integrate technology for?
100%.
Picture of people's lunches.
I do everything I do is. So when geht weiter, or the Elam is going to disperse.
Disperse it.
I'm finding them. I'm here. Yeah, I mean, listen. Okay, good.
You got work. Gary deserves our
I think it's a golden opportunity.
Sure, Gary. Your words were very moving and touching, and thank you for helping make all this happen. Yeah. So you want me to this one is signed?
Well,
You want-
that was the people who gave it to us.
Okay. So Gary is your name?
My name's Gary. My wife's name's Linda.
So Gary and Linda.
Gary and Linda.
Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of quick reminders. Anybody who would like a Tanya is welcome to take one. The only proviso is that you use it.
How do you prove
Now,
it?
whenever it's available, please help yourself as long as you're going to pass it on to somebody who needs it. Last but certainly not least,
There you
we
go.
have a quorum of interested
This one too.
participants.
This one too.
Same?
Same? Also Gary and Linda?
Yeah.
Two.
Well, we had one that we bought and then one we received as a gift.
But this one you may want to give to someone else.
Well, then
Okay.
it'll be at least signed.
Okay.
But we probably won't. We lend out. We have lots of people who borrow our books. Then at least they'll know who they belong to so they can bring it back.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
One thing I didn't understand, Rabbi.
Only one thing.
Yes.
Okay, good.
One thing I didn't understand is that instead of arguing with your friend who had the essence of what the rabbi said, why don't you go and ask him?
The Rebbe?
Yes.
We couldn't ask him that. We could ask him nuances. We couldn't ask him,
No.
what did you say? It was not respectful
No, what did you
to
mean with what you said?
No, we didn't do that.
No.
We had to figure that out. Then we would present it to him once we figured out. It was before that stage. Yeah, we had to do the work. It's a good question. Yeah.
He's a very good friend of Rabbi's.
You have a pen? I need a pen.
So what do our pseudo-Jews do? They don't actually read
Yontif.
My glasses.
I'll come on Tuesday.
Teach on Tanya on Sunday.
On Tuesday?
Yeah, on Sunday I teach Tanya.
What time Sunday?
8:30 a.m.
No, exercise.
Exercise at 9:30.
And the pool is full of people. They can't,
So go swimming at 7:30.
come at 5:30.
5:30 in the morning. I'm teaching every day 6:30. One day 7.
But
Shabbos.
I'm up at 4:30.
Rabbi, a very meaningful talk.
Goes.
Thank
God
you.
should bless you with nachas and gezind and
Amen.
all good things.
Thank you, thank you.
And I know this guy. I don't know what you think of him, Rabbi, but I'm not so crazy about him. He's my idol.
After what he said about me, I'm our biggest fan.
You probably retained
Rabbi.
10%, but I wish you would have started with that at the beginning of your talk rather than at the end.
You have a pen?
Nobody seems to have one.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm still here. I'll be here tomorrow. I'm leaving tomorrow afternoon.
You going to New York?
Hi.
Hello.
I have a question, and it's going to seem off the wall, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
No questions off the wall.
I just had a salad with croutons, and I did not wash because I didn't know there was croutons. Do I have to say bracha salt? Do I have to wash again? What do I do?
You certainly have to say Birkat Hamazon.
She does wash.
You had a kazayas of croutons for sure.
He's a very good friend of Rabbi Kaplan.
Yes, I did. So do I have to wash again, or
If you want to be very religious, wash now. Wash. Eat a kazayat of bread. You're covered all bases.
Okay, good for you to ask.
But you would have to bench anyway.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
You're going to come to the menorah lighting at Shin? Shin, you going to come to the menorah lighting?
Where is that?
Well, you used to have your pharmacy.
Oh, down there.
Down on College
down there
Street.
anymore.
No, you're not there anymore.
You're still doing that?
That's my mistake. I did.
Rabbi Kaplan. Thanks so much.
Shalom Aleichem Luba.
Thank you so much for your book. Your book, 20 years ago in Kharkov, Ukraine, it was first book in Russian about Rabbi. I used to work in Jewish community. It was new, everything. And we took 30 books and gave in some Jewish houses. And they read it like loud for 10, 12 people. They listen and
Beautiful.
it's really...
You're from Kharkov?
Yeah.
My grandmother's from Kharkov. My great-grandfather was arrested in Kharkov.
Really?
Yeah, and he was
Which grandfather?
Innocent, beaten to death. A whole group of Hasidim had the whole underground. They were all arrested in 1939. And because of that, my grandmother went away to Siberia. The father where they escaped later in Tashkent. And that's how they survived the Nazis. Because the Nazis came a year later and they killed everybody.
Yeah, Lina's aunt.
Really?
My mother's nephew.
My grandmother grew up in
They were
Kharkov.
sent to Siberia, and then he ended up in Kharkov.
That's why they...
You go work with him.
Wow.
Yeah.
She came when she was
On Erev Hanukkah, 1940,
It's, yeah.
they murdered something like 60,000 Jews.
Yeah, my father family.
In 2 days.
All of them.
In 2 days.
It's, yeah. It's like...
Kiev was right before Yom Kippur.
Kiev,
Started to make
Kiev,
tshuva.
it's Drobitsky Yar.
Drobitsky
Kiev,
Yar.
it's Babi Yar.
Babi Yar, and comes Drobitsky Yar.
Drobitsky Yar. My father's family, all his family.
Hello, how are you?
I just...
Thank you. Good to see.
Drobitsky Yar. 2 days to kill everybody. Come again.
You have a pen? Everybody has a pen? We'll get a pen. If you're planning, I mean, maybe you can do it on the table, maybe. I can go for a spin from here. You can leave it meanwhile. I'll go one more time, since there are people waiting here. So.
Okay,
if you have a
place
pen,
side.
if you have a pen, I'll be happy to... What were you saying?
Ladies and
This
gentlemen.
is something for your wife.
Oh, thank you so much.
Like that you don't
That's
have
so
to
kind
carry
of
it.
you.
Like you could roll it wherever.
I have where to put it. I have...
Okay, thank you so
Ladies and
much.
gentlemen, I have good news for you.
How are you?
Rabbi Jacobson has agreed to go for another spin. Please have a seat. Even though
Tell them this is to save the best for
Even
last.
though much of the crowd has left, I told him that those who have remained are those with the highest IQ. I said, these are the real Chachamim. So he's going to reveal some of his profoundest ideas in your honor. And it would be appropriate for everybody to sit down and participate.
Okay. You ready?
Rabbi Isai, if you want to be known as a member of the community with the highest IQ, please be seated.
And absorb.
And absorb. the talking on the edge is not helpful. Rabbi Isai, please. As they say in French, if you're staying, have a seat. If you're going for a voyage, Gesundheit. A little respect goes a long way. Thank you.
Okay. I'll share some personal anecdotes because I did have the privilege, as I said, working closely for the Rebbe, and people are intrigued by the process. But first I want to explain that this is related to Yud Tes Kislev as well, because whatever we Chassidim did by the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim did for him, which means they would listen to what he said, absorbed it, and also documented it. So in a way, it's a recreation. So let me share some behind-the-scenes information, some behind-the-scenes secrets. Okay? So number one, the Rebbe was a brutal editor. I use the word brutal editor. But I don't mean that, God forbid, in a negative way. I loved it because the Rebbe was like a surgeon with a scalpel. And when we presented his words for him to review, you could imagine that he held it up to the highest standards. And I learned so many nuances, the power of nuance in communication from the way the Rebbe would edit. And as I said, he would literally rip it apart. Just to give a few small examples. Maybe they're not so small. The Rebbe never used negative words. You never heard from the Rebbe's word the word evil. In Yiddish would be schlecht, or in Hebrew ra. He would say hepech hatov, the opposite of good. Now this may sound to you just like semantics, it's not. Because it was a way of looking at life always as being either good or potentially good, or getting there. Another nuance. In general, in English, the Rebbe spoke in Yiddish primarily, but the same expression in English, you would say, for example, in addition to this room being a social hall, it also doubles as, not only is this room a social hall, it's also a synagogue. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but...
on Simchas Torah.
Okay, on Simchas Torah. My point is, so Shabbos is not only a day of pleasure, it's also a day of joy. Moshe Rabbeinu was not only a teacher, he was also a king, a leader. So it sounds like a fine sentence. When I began working, it was in the end of 1979 when I began to be the main writer of the talks of the Rebbe. I noticed, not immediately, but after a while, I kept noticing the Rebbe would always change the phrase. Instead of it saying that it's that this room is not only, and that, the Rebbe would say, in addition to it being one, it is also that. Instead of not only this, also, in addition also. Now, I asked many grammaticians and wordsmiths, and it's very subtle difference. In English, you don't even notice it. But I realized the Rebbe didn't want to use the word not only, even though not only means yes, but the word not. Not only is Shabbos pleasure, also joy, you could say much simpler. In addition, it's also joy, so you only have, again, positive. Now, to many of you, this may mean almost nothing, but it's not. When you're a writer, these things have very powerful ways of expressing. I'll show you another example. Since we're coming to Hanukkah, there was some organization that would prepare full-page ads in the New York Times and other newspapers for special holidays. A message to people. So one of the people behind it asked me to write up a Hanukkah message. So this goes back at least to probably 1988, 89, maybe even earlier. And I wrote and I titled it Whispering Flames. Based on the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's expression, when it comes to Hanukkah, we should listen to the story the flames tell us. It's an expression that when you look at the flames, listen to their story. They have a story to tell us. So I thought, a nice poetic way of saying it is whispering flames. Flames that whisper to us. The Rebbe circled the word whispering. It was in English. And he wrote, Harizeloi bechashoyi ki'im persumen nisa. It's not quiet. Hanukkah flames, Hanukkah lights are meant to be public. That's why you have public menorahs. They pronounce public statements. They declare freedom, power of light over dark, etc. The word whispering, even though we know the flames don't speak physically, but the word whispering suggests a type of behind the scenes, quiet, secretive. That's how nuanced it was. Now, to be honest, I completely respected the Rebbe's approach and I changed it. But I remember thinking to myself, does the Rebbe appreciate my poetry here, you know? I'm saying that half mockingly, obviously, half jokingly, because I understood that was not the point. But the point was that the precision. So I forgot, I think we used either Once Upon a Flame or The Story of the Flames. And on I can go on different examples of the art of communicating, especially nuances. When the Rebbe would edit things, he would often turn it, instead of black and white, made it more gray. So many would think, well, why can't you just say it the way it is? Because an intelligent ideas, they're not always black and white. Sometimes it has to be left a little for interpretation. And on and on. Here's one other important story that happened. It was early in my career, which was a lesson that I never forgot. It was around the winter of 1980, and I prepared a talk that the Rebbe was going to edit because he had asked for it. I worked very hard, 2 days, 2 nights. I almost didn't sleep. So finally, I was exhausted. I finished. I told the guy in the office. So when it's finished being typed, it was still a typewriter in those days. Proofread it and then give it into the Rebbe, which would go to the secretary's office into a box where the ingoing mail to the Rebbe would be brought to him. And I went home just to maybe get a little rest. The truth is I couldn't get too much rest, so I decided to call the office. I said, so what happened? He says, yeah, I brought it down, it's by the Rebbe. I said, did you proofread it? He said, no, I forgot. I said, are you crazy? Run down immediately, and if it wasn't delivered to the Rebbe, take it out of the box and bring it back and read it. You can't give it to the Rebbe something with typos. The Rebbe's going to correct our typing mistakes. Anyway, too late. He calls me back, it's already by the Rebbe. So there I had another sleepless night. And I remember I was so disturbed. I mean, simply, it wasn't respectful. Giving to the Rebbe, like with all your mistakes, typos. We're not even talking about anything, it's just simple typos. Anyway, the morning comes, I get a call from the secretary. I already was anticipating this. And he says to me, you should come down here. The Rebbe has some message for you. He had written something. And I was like, I said, did the Rebbe edit it? He said, yeah. I hope the Rebbe didn't edit it, But he edited the whole thing, and there's something, I wouldn't say that the secretary was exactly gloating, but I guess he wanted me to get the message. I come down, I run down, I bring it back. I couldn't wait to watch. I'm reading it as I'm going up the steps. And I did not like what I read, but that was it. The Rebbe wrote these words. I don't share this very often, but I think it's a very powerful lesson. He wrote in Hebrew, I dedicate a certain amount of hours to edit these talks. And there's 2 options of how these hours are going to be used. Either, one, the Rebbe made, Aleph, one, that the time will be used for me to correct all your typos and spelling mistakes. Or you'll correct the mistakes yourself, and I'll use the time to add depth and footnotes and more details and more interesting points and stuff like that. But then the last line was the devastating line. He wrote, "V'abchira b'yotchem," and the choice is yours. How I'm going to use my time. Now, look, I know many people would be very disturbed. I was disturbed, and I immediately wrote to the Rebbe a letter apologizing and so on. But I learned from this, the Rebbe could have just easily said, what are you sending me things with typos? He was like saying, it's your choice. How are you going to use my time? And it taught me how the Rebbe's sensitivity, while he was being sharp and very blunt, But he was also sensitive in saying, you have responsibility. How you going? I want to edit my talks, but you're responsible to make sure you do everything you can and don't use me for things that you can fix yourself. And to me, it was like a general lesson in life that when you have a man of that caliber, a Rebbe, don't ask him if you need a headache. You don't have to ask him whether you should take an aspirin or an Advil or whatever it is. You use him for the things that he can add to your dimension that the Rebbe could add, instead of him doing something that you can do on your own. Anyway, I wrote an apology, even though, frankly, it was the other guy's fault, but I took the blame because I ran the office and I felt responsible, and I was. And I wrote to the Rebbe. The Rebbe did not respond. However, a few weeks later, in the middle of a Farbrengen, this was not uncommon, the Rebbe would say things that those that wrote to the Rebbe knew he was talking to them. And the Rebbe then, suddenly out of the blue, says, and from time to time, people are human beings and they make mistakes. At first I wasn't sure whether it was this, because it could be about any mistake, But then I saw the Rebbe said mistake can be in publishing, I saw it was related to what happened. And the Rebbe said the thing when you learn about mistakes, you think what happens with mistakes is, mistakes you either ignore them, or you make believe they didn't happen, or you learn from them, and you learn how to do it better next time. And that's the key to every time you make a mistake. That was what the Rebbe said. I said, no one understood except myself what happened. Now, I'm sure the lesson is for everybody, but I definitely took it personally. And it actually helped me years later, well, many times, where mistakes have happened. And I remember one particular case where I was responsible for raising some money for a book we were publishing. And don't ask, it was a nightmare. When it came to printing it, the printer didn't know how to read English, so they literally printed the dedication backwards. I'm not kidding you, backwards. Not like a spelling mistake. The whole word was backwards. I received the book, I look at it, I couldn't believe it. It's published already, thousands of books. I call up the printer, I said, what's going on? You were supposed to get approval, you don't just, you have sign off and these type of things in publishing. Yeah, the guy left, he thought he faxed it, he didn't fax it, don't ask. So I said, look, you know what? I'm not paying you for this unless you reprint it. We'll put a label on it. Imagine putting a label on a printed book, it looks ridiculous. I said, no, we're not paying you, it's your mistake. I call up the donor, because I knew I don't want him to find out before I tell him. I call up the donor, and I said to the donor, it was a $30,000 dedication. It was significant. And I said to him, I'm sending you back the money, because it was printed the wrong way, and I'm not going to take your money, that's it. He said, no, I'm not going to take the money from you. It's not your mistake. I took responsibility completely. And that was that. Then when he got a hold of the book, he wasn't so calm. He called me up, and he says to me, let me ask you something. How many years are you in publishing? And your father was in publishing, so collected 40 years in publishing. And you never figured out that something has to be proof that it should be spelled right? Is the way he's talking to me. So I told him, I said, I'm offering you back the money. He wouldn't take the money back. But then, my biggest concern was I burned bridges with this guy. You lose your whole credibility, but there's something so, So I wrote him a long letter. And I wrote him the story that happened to me in 1980 with the Rebbe, with mistakes. He learned from your mistakes. And that story actually ingratiated myself to him. And I was able to show him that when you're accountable, trust is not built on perfection, it's built on accountability. That's the bottom line. Anyway, just sharing some little anecdotes that are all part of the Hasidic approach to things, that we all have setbacks and we all have times we make mistakes. It's not the mistakes we make, it's what happens afterwards, your attitude. Most of us cover up. One lie leads to another lie, deception leads to deception. And the thing is, no one expects perfection from human beings. The beautiful thing about Chassidus is, especially when you learn Tanya, that Tanya is not talking to a perfect human being. As a matter of fact, the Alter Rebbe says, I'm not talking to a perfect human being. We're talking about people who have challenges, daily temptations, things that seduce them, things that distract them, and yet you are accountable because that makes you into a dignified human being. You're not a victim of circumstances. You're not just a product of consequences. I remember my father was in the hospital, this Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, 1989. He had a mini stroke. So the Rebbe called me, Erev Yom Kippur is the custom to give lekach, right? Honey cake, for a sweet new year. He gave me honey cake, and he said, this is for your father, tell him you have a sweet new year, And then he says like this, with a smile, the Rebbe to me says, tell your father that when he finishes the mission he accomplished, the mission for which he was sent to the hospital, he'll be released. So I go to the hospital, I tell my father this. My mother is there as well. She starts running around doing mivtzayim, giving this one a neshek kit and this one this and that. My father calls back my mother and says, it's not your mission, you're visiting me, it's my mission. I'm the one that was sent here, I'm stuck here. Anyway, my father did whatever he did. After Yom Kippur, Rabbi Chadakov, which was the Rebbe's chief of staff, and it was not a small thing, he came to see my father. And he says, the Rebbe is asking whether you already finished your mission. So it wasn't just a joke, it was like serious. And I thought to myself, my father, no one wants to go to a hospital, let's be honest. You only go to a hospital because you have no choice. And he went because of a stroke. And yet the Rebbe would refuse to look at it that you're there just for a stroke. It means you wouldn't be there unless you have something to accomplish, something positive. And when you finish that, you can be released. This is quintessential way of thinking that changes everything. If you apply that to life, look, how many of us complain? How many of us say, I wish this didn't happen, this, that. Now, of course, we all have a right to feel bad about things, but there's a certain positive spark in everything. Even that, just to show you this is an attitude. This is, again, Chassidus. Chassidus taught, not that things are perfect. There's nothing perfect in this world. But that everything that happens can be harnessed, can be directed and channeled to something positive. Now maybe, you could hear there's a positivism and positive psychology today and in other schools of thought. But it comes from somewhere. It's an attitude that goes back from the beginning of time to Judaism. But Chassidus really, I would say, personified it and turned it into an approach. Because when you know you have a soul, and you know you're on a mission, and you know that you live a mission-centric life, then whatever comes your way, even a setback, is part of that mission. And there's a bigger picture, and we have to always realize there's a journey, and it's like frames in a film. You cannot come to any conclusion until you see the whole picture unfold, and we don't see it sometimes for years. If we're blessed, we may see the blessings quickly. Sometimes it takes time. These are all underlying messages that when you read the Rebbe's letters, you hear the talks, there's certain themes that emerge again and again that are really empowering on a personal level, on a psychological level, an emotional level. And I think a lot of Judaism, people today don't realize the profundity of that relevance. People say, okay, I understand keeping Shabbos is good, I'll be kosher, I'll pray, I'll go to shul, I'll study, but there's a lot more to it. Torah and mitzvahs was given to us also to actualize our lives, to be the best possible Jews and be the best possible human beings. I deal a lot with that because that's really where the bridge, because I really find that to reach people today, especially those that were not educated or brought up with Judaism, I find two key ways to reach people, through psychology and through music. Because people are there already. Almost everyone's in therapy, or should be in therapy. And music. Music is a door, is a key. Everyone loves music. Young people love music. And both of those are, I believe, ways to get into a person's soul. Some people say, I'm not interested, Rabbi, in the religious stuff and so on. I'm not suggesting that we don't use in every way possible to encourage Jews to be more Jewish and more observant. But sometimes the way to reach people is to show that relevance. They say, really, that really can help my life?